I discovered people were interested in me for what I had to say, for how I was thinking. And they weren't put off by the fact that I was this big fat lump in a wheelchair who couldn't move, who was very foreboding. By the time they actually came to meet me face to face and see me, my physical presence, they got to know me so well that it didn't matter. I could have had 3 heads and it wouldn't have mattered. My close friends on that system, we don't just communicate by computer. We phone each other up. You sort of reach a stage where you're that close to somebody that, yeah, you can trust them with your phone number. You phone each other up, we talk over the phone. We meet up in real life. We go down the pub. Today we're off to a barbecue where hundreds of people who use a virtual community called Kix will be there. It's not just this distant thing. You know, they're real relationships.
Dave, you look reasonably unusual, and
Doesn't look unusual.
somebody will come up and they'll think, all right, what does he look like up front?
Community really happens in informal conversations among strangers in public places. Now, we used to have the commons and the town square. In America, we had the drugstore, lunch counter, a place where you could have a cup of coffee and talk with the mailman and the mayor. That no longer exists in many places. The automobile has brought us suburbia. It has disconnected people from each other. These high-rise buildings have replaced the villages. The fast food outlets and the malls have replaced the places where people used to congregate. We have a real hunger for that kind of community. Even though we move from place to place, we are much less rooted than our grandparents were. We need to have a feeling of conviviality and sharing interests with like minds, of having people out there who know us, who share our interests. If we're in the hospital, they'll come visit us. If they're in trouble, they'll help us. We're beginning to find some of that on computer networks.
When the real world is failing us, it's our humanity that leads us in search of something else. In San Francisco, there's a virtual community called The Well, the Whole Earth Electronic Link. It's where Phil Catalfo went when his son was suffering from leukemia.
The Well for me was already a community of resource and support. And so when this happened, when something this grave happens to you, or more pointedly to your child, you reach for every bit of help you can get. I mean, it's just not something you can deal with very handily on your own. And so it's very natural for me to reach out to the community that had been the most supportive to me as a parent in the years leading up to that.
A couple of days after I got home from the hospital, I sort of went over to his office, and he was typing on his computer, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said, well, I'm talking to a friend. I'm like, how? And he says, through a computer network. And I'm like, what? And he said, and so he explained it to me, and it's pretty cool.
There were times when maybe Gabe was going through a really hard patch where he was having nausea or pain or whatever the case might be. Or maybe I was just speaking for myself and talking about the worries I had within the context of my family and the context of my marriage and the context of my role as a father, and was worrying about how I was going to be able to pull it off. And just being able to say that online and have people say, no, listen, you're doing fine, or listen, we're behind you all the way, and whatever the case might be, was an immense relief and an invaluable resource. So when his blood counts were low, and they stayed low for several weeks, a little longer than we expected them to, we got very nervous, and it became just an automatic thing for me to turn there when I had something to say, and it got me through the darkest times. And it also helped me really exult in the happiest times. It's not like the virtual community is never going to replace the non-virtual community, but it certainly can augment it. And it ought to augment it, because we can't have too many ways to make those kind of connections. We need those kind of connections if we're going to preserve human culture and ourselves as a species. And that's one of the unexpected bonuses of this technology, is that it can help us do that.
You know, I'm old enough that I can actually remember a world in which there was no television. I can very dimly remember that. I don't remember what we did before we had it, but I can remember my father bringing the first one home, and it was a big wooden box with a little round screen and a sort of dim, jerky image. And after that, what we mostly did was sit around and watch that thing, and we're still watching it. It's gotten bigger and brighter, and it's in color. But I think it's difficult for us to know what we lose. We're constantly losing things, and often as we lose them, we can't remember what they were. They go. We lose them totally.
When we look with hope to cyberspace, to replace what we have lost, then we know that we have given up on the world that we have made, though we don't know where we're going or what it is we've left. We are rushing to find a future that will save us from ourselves.
Most people are accustomed to asking the question, what will a new technology do? Very few are inclined to ask, what will it undo? Then I think we have to ask the question, who will be the winners and who the losers in any new technology? Because all technological innovation is a Faustian bargain. It giveth and it taketh away, but not in equal measure. I think a good way to think about our situation today is to imagine that it is 1904, but we know what we now know about the effects of the automobile. Surely someone would have said, is there anything we can do to maximize the advantages and minimize the disadvantages? Well, no one did that in 1904, or 1914, or 1924, or 34. Now in 1994, I think it's rather too late to raise this question, because it's clear that the automobile controls us. We don't control it. I had thought, certainly with computer technology, we would begin to engage in a serious inquiry of both its advantages and disadvantages. But as it seems, this is not happening. Most people are going ahead in their enthusiasm for computer technology in the same blind way as we have done with previous technologies.
Technology is beguiling. We stand frozen in its beams as it illuminates the future. We are mesmerized by its clicks and whirs amid the din that is the present.
Our nerves are raw. Things are beeping and buzzing. We're there trying to, rest for a second and bing the fax machine, that paper rolling out. When I see my fax, I get sweaty. I think, what now? It's usually not good. It's usually a problem. That's why they're faxing you. And then if that wasn't enough, you're blinking like crazy, and your email is here, and you've got to answer everybody. You have to answer dumb questions and smart questions in the same way, because people know you got that message, and there's no way of going, selectively answering questions. We don't want so many messages, and we're sick of being so very accessible to every kind of call and every kind of person that ordinarily maybe we could have skipped over or forgotten to get back to or not been home. And this email thing is just, for most of us, gone too far.
One of the dangerous, although understandable, assumptions that we now have is that information is always and ever our friend. It's understandable because in the past, people sought information in order to solve specific problems. But now we're faced with a problem we haven't had before, which is information glut. Information has become a form of garbage. It comes from dozens of sources. It's relentless. It's a commodity that can be bought and sold. It's not directed at anyone in particular. And so we're now faced with the problem, not of how to get information, but how to get rid of information in order to give some sort of coherence to our lives.
Information has become the raw material of our age. Each word, each sound, each picture is another bit of data. But like no other resource before, it doesn't shrink, it grows. And now, in our technological dizziness, we are turning even ourselves to information. With meticulous obedience to the power of the machine, we are searching for the data that determines human beings. We are counting the information that makes up our genes. And within 10 years, when all the counting is complete, we will have a map of nothing less than life itself. With that map, we can change our course.
When a child is conceived, approximately 100,000 genes from mum and dad mixed together. They're cooked in the womb, so to speak, for 9 months, and then out pops a human being. Its growth, things like colour of hair, colour of eyes, and all sorts of other properties are determined by the genes that a child receives from its mother and father. What the scientists in the Human Genome Project are trying to do is actually to minutely analyse each of these genes, write down the instructions that each gene contains, so that eventually on computer databases they will have an electronic equivalent of the genetic recipe that gives rise to human beings.
We stand at the threshold of a revolution in biotechnology. This revolution will in the very near future enable us to do a whole range of unprecedented things to human beings and allow us to control and direct human nature to an unprecedented extent. Up to now, we've just been the passive victims of human evolution. It's gone a particular way, and we've had to take it or leave it. But I think increasingly we will be able to take control of our evolutionary destiny and try to determine what sort of people we actually wish to become.
Genetic engineering with humans will start with the repair of genetic defects, like cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy. But I'm quite sure it won't stop there. Laws may be passed against genetic engineering with humans, but they will only delay it a bit. Once it is known how to improve animals, I think the temptation to try with humans will be irresistible.
We will certainly be able to use the new technology to create beings with substantial and unprecedented qualities. In particular, we can hope that we will be able to create people who will be longer lived, more resistant to disease and environmental pollutants, and who will be healthier while they are longer lived, so they will have a longer, healthier life. And of course, these will be substantial advantages for those who can get the benefit of them. More remote is the possibility of actually creating people who are more intelligent. It's more remote because intelligence is badly understood and is probably governed by a large constellation of genes rather than just small numbers of genes. But if we can improve intelligence, then of course that too will create a substantial advantage on those who can benefit from the technology.
One of the utopias that is put forward is that we will be able to, almost as it were, improve the stock of the human race. And that sounds terribly attractive, yet one has to ask questions as to who will have access to this, who will be able to buy the technology, who will control the dissemination of the technology. We may find, if we are not very careful, that we cease to regard human beings as being intrinsically valuable in themselves. We may regard them as simply the biological working out of a computer program that is written in their genes. And I would like to retain the notion that a human being is actually rather more than the sum of its parts, that it cannot be reduced to a strip of DNA 3 billion base pairs long, but that it has a value that transcends the molecular biology.
We're no longer Homo sapiens as it fell to the ground in the beginning. We've become something else. And we live to a remarkable old age mainly because our teeth are kept in our heads. We're all vaccinated. That's technology. We're not, you know, our bodies are filled with antibodies that wouldn't necessarily exist in nature. So we're not natural anymore. I think we're technological creatures.
We are abandoning the present while the future is uncertain. We are fiddling with technology while the world around us burns. But in the march of evolution, there is a terrible fading sound of the ones who fall away, who aren't carried with the crowd.
In the last 10,000 years, we have been accumulating information at an ever-increasing rate and passing it on to succeeding generations. This transmission of information by language has really taken the place of biological evolution through DNA, which has not changed significantly over that period. We cannot continue much longer with this exponential growth of information because our brains are still the same as in caveman days. However, we are now on the verge of a new era in which it will be possible to modify our DNA and improve our mental capabilities and length of life. I just hope we use this power wisely